Okay, we are in a discussion of AWS Solutions Architect, and previous videos we've been discussing about IAM, Identity and Access Management, and we've been discussing about policies. So we before we going forward in this video, I want you to clarify what is the difference between explicit versus implicit DINI in AWS IAM. So that's all we're going to discuss. So let's clarify what is explicit DINI and implicit DINI. So explicit versus implicit DINI, right? In AWS IAM, DINIs always take precedence over allows. So always the statement in DINIs take precedence over allows, right? There are two ways policies can DINI access, right? The first one is explicit DINI. When a policy statement especially include effect deny, right? So in policy syntax, we're going to discuss in soon. So if it is in there under effect as deny, so that's called explicit deny. So once it's explicit deny, if you add any statement afterwards allowing, it won't work because it's explicitly denied, right? And then implicit deny. Implicit deny is when no policy explicitly allow an action in a default state. So that is implicit deny means if anything is not explicitly allowed in an action, right? All right, so let's clarify this one with these two examples, right? Explicit deny example. So the following policy explicitly denies all actions on S3 resources. So see that in effect, deny action is S3 buckets. So that will explicitly deny actions on S3 resources, right? This will override any allow permission from the other policies. So because of we are explicitly denied this action in S3 buckets, so it will override any other allow permission in other policies. Or if you put anything afterwards, it's not going to work. So implicit deny example. So policy that only allows specific S3 action. So under effect, you say allow. The action is S3 get object and list object, right? And all other S3 actions like put object are implicitly denied, right? So in here, explicitly allowed two actions, right, on S3 buckets. So the first one is get object, right? And then list bucket. So list bucket means it lists all the buckets, and then get object means it gives you an object in a bucket. But if you look into put object, that means upload any object into a S3 bucket, that's implicitly denied. So from going onwards, we just need to understand these two concepts, explicitly denied and implicitly denied. So with this example, I think we got a good idea what is this explicit deny and implicit deny, right? All right, so we are moving forward, right? So we're going to discuss policies and policy types now. So the first one in here is identity-based policies. So policies attach directly to IAM identities. So that's identity-based policies. So they are attached to users, groups, and roles to grant permissions, right? So under identity based policies, you got two different types. So one is a managed policies. So standalone policies that can be attached to multiple identities. So they are standalone policies, and inline policies. They are embedded directly within the single identity, right? So in the diagram, you can see AWS IAM policy type, identity-based policies. So under identity-based policies, right, you have managed policies, right? They can be attached to manage policies to IAM users, IAM groups, and IAM roles, right? And then you got inline policies, and then you have permission boundaries, right? Manage policy types. So AWS manage. So AWS managed policies are created and maintained by AWS for common use cases. So they are pre-existing policies in the AWS portal. So created for common user cases, like they got sort of categories and the policies with the relevant roles, right? And then customer manage, created and maintained by you for your specific needs. So custom manage policies you can create, and you can edit one of the existing policy, and you can create it, you can make it customized. So that can be used customized according to your specific needs. So either you can remove some of the permission from existing policy, or you can add more permissions to existing policy, right? So policy selection best practice. Use AWS manage for common scenarios and services. So sort of common scenarios and services, use AWS manage policies. Create a custom customer manage for organization wide policies. So maybe create a organization wide policy for uh, custom policies, right? Use inline for exceptional cases that must stay with the identity. So if you need any exceptional case, so you should be able to create a one for inline policy, right? So the underneath graph explains some of policy, right? So use is percentage, adoption rate, and management complexity. So AWS manage, if you have a look, usage percentages over 60, and then you could see AWS manage policies adoption rate is around 80, right? And then management complexity is less, very less. It's about 10%. But here, if you go customer managed policies, right? So that's normally everything is under 50, right? So it's a bit harder to manage, right? And inline policies, right? Inline policies, management complexity is sort of in high, uh, but the usage percentage is very less. All right, we are further discussing about these policies. So we've been discussing identity-based policies in a slide. So attached to identity, IAM identities, they are attached to users, groups, and roles, right? Control what action identities can perform. So these policies consist of the actions these identities can perform. Manage policies, AWS or customer or inline policies. So identity policies can be AWS managed policy or customer managed or an inline policy, right? Used for permission assignment across services. So These policies are used for permission assignment across the services, right? And the second type is resource-based policies. Resource-based policies are attached directly to resources, not supported by all AWS services. They are not supported by all AWS services. Resources mainly control who can access the resource. So it does control access of the resource. Example, S3 bucket policies, SQS, right? Um, queue policies, right? So these are normally with the resources, some of the resources, right? They're not supported by all AWS services, but some services support like S3 buckets, bucket have policies, right? And then you got permission policies, right? Define allowed and denied actions, right? Can be attached to identities or resources. So permission policies can be either attached to identity based, that means identities, and then they can be also applied to resources. JSON documents following AWS policy grammar, right? They are in the JSON documents, right? And then you have role trust policies, right? Special policy for IAM roles define which principal can assume the role required for cross-account access. So this role trust policy is normally used for cross-account access. So define which principal can assume the role, right? What sort of principals can assume that role when it's applied, right? Um, See that got in here. It's not very clear, but so AWS policies here, they are in like a sets. This is like a set. So in these ones, identity-based policies, and then you got resource-based policies, and this overlapping one is a common element, right? Identity-based attached to IAM entities, resource-based attached to resources, both define who can access what. So that's the main idea, who can access what and defined by this policy, right? Uh, so here in this graph, so just to give you a common idea of AWS policy types, resources and identity, right? Uh, so you got a service control policy, right? Service control policies are normally a target organization level, right? That's what it says, AWS organizations. And then uh, you got identity-based policies targeting IAM users and groups, right? And then you have resource-based policies, right? And then you have permission boundaries, right? Permission boundaries, target for IAM users, right? Resource-based policies target uh, services like Lambda functions, um, DynamoDB tables, sort of things. S3 buckets, right? And then you got a session policy. Session policies are um, target IAM roles, right? When they're creating a session, right? They are normally getting assigned for these users, right? All right. We are discussing further about AWS policy types, right? Multiple policy types can control two resources in a different context, right? First one is identity-based policies, right? And then resource-based policies, and third one is permission boundaries, set maximum permission for an entry. The fourth one is organization policies, control permissions across multiple accounts, right? So the following diagram underneath just says those four AWS IAM policy management, right? Identity-based policies, resource-based policies, permission boundaries, and then organization policies, right? So identity-based attached to users, groups, and roles. Resource-based attached to mainly to the resources. Permission boundaries sets maximum permission to that identity can have, right? Just give its policy types hierarchy, right? Um, so how much sort of percentage you have in there, right? And you have here in the bottom, the table shows you a summary of policy type attached to, and then a primary function. So first one is identity based. IAM users, groups, roles define what actions identities can perform on resources. Resource bases, resource base, AWS resources, S3 SQS, control who can access resource and what can they do. Permission down boundaries, IAM users or roles, so set maximum permission an identity can have. Organization service control policies, SPCs, will be attached to organization units or accounts. Limit permission across entire organization or account. So need to keep on. You have to remember the service control policies normally limit permissions across the entire organization or account. They are not like you can allow something. That is service control policies, right? All right. AWS policy types, and we're going to discuss understanding policy categories, right? AWS offers multiple policy types that control what actions principals can perform on which resources and under which conditions. So in the policies, you can include the conditions as well, the on which condition these can perform on what actions on resources, right? Um, right. So here you can see identity-based policies, right? Attached to IAM, user group roles, grant permissions, IAM policy framework, right? Resource-based policies control access, right? And then session policies applied during role assumption, temporary access. So session policy is applied during a role assumption. So role will be assumed into a principal to do a work on AWS policy framework, right? And then permission boundaries, set maximum permission for IAM. That is a limit permission. Mainly the identity-based grant permission, right? Resource-based control access, and then permission boundaries, limit permissions, and then session policies gives you temporary access. That means uh, role assumptions, right? So policy evaluation order, we're going to talk it broadly, but in this case, we have policy evaluation order. The first one is explicit denial, then permission boundaries, and then session policies, and the fourth one is identity and resource policy. That's how policy evaluation goes through. So, so again, here identity-based policy. So attached to groups, users roles, control what actions identity can perform, can be managed or inline, right? Resource-based policies attach directly to resources, control who can access the resource, always inline, defined on resources. So resource-based policies are always inline policies, right? Then permission boundaries set maximum permission an identity can have. Use for delegation of permissions does not grant permission by itself, right? Only for delegation. Session policies limit permission for temporary sessions used with assumed role for federated users. We discussed federated users. Federated users are the users using external identities, right, to assume a role in AWS without adding users to IAM, right, cannot exceed identity-based permission, right? So the query can have anything here. Identity, AWS, IAM, policy types, interaction, how much policy interaction, right? Uh, so now we're going to discuss the policies, the order of policies evaluation, what order they are evaluating the policies, right? Um, all right, we could discuss more details in a single account policy evaluation. This is normally in a single account, how that policy evaluate, not for the cross account, right? In that flow chart, you can see a policy evaluation process. Let's see, you got a policy. We're going to discuss policy syntax in the next few slides, but now let's have a look how policies are evaluated, what order, right? So policy evaluation process, default deny. So AWS follows default deny principle, right? And then evaluate policies. All applicable policies are examined, right? And then we're going to check explicit deny check. System looks for explicit denies. So anything explicitly denied, uh, it will be denied. And even if it's another policy allows that, that's not going to work, right? And then decision path, explicit deny, override all other permission, right? So if explicit deny exists, request denied. If no explicit deny, proceed to next evaluation step. Final decision depend on subsequent evaluation steps, right? So in this diagram, let's have a look. So it's a start, default deny state, right? And then explicit deny, yes, then it's deny access, right? And if it's not explicit deny, no, any allows, give allow access. It's no any allow, then deny access, no, right? Let's have a look at this one, just like a diagram. So this is it start, and then the checking default deny, start with the default deny, denying everything, and then exclude all evaluate all applicable policies. Then you're going to check for explicit deny, right? Is explicit deny exist? Yes, then access will be denied. So explicit deny exists, no, then it will continue, keep continuing the evaluation, right? We're going to keep continue talking about uh, policies evaluation flow, right? So organization policy evaluation flow. When evaluating permission in an AWS account with within an organization, the system follows a specific evaluation path. So check if account is an organization with resource control policy. What is this resource control policy? So I got a resource control policy. So resource control policies are type of organization policy that you can use to manage permission in your organization. Resource control policies offer central control over maximum available permission for resources in your organization. Resource control policies help you to ensure resources in your account stay within your organization's access control guidelines. Resource control policies are available only in an organization that has all features enabled, right? Resource control policies aren't available if your organization has enabled only consolidated billing features, right? So, if that organization has a resource control policies, right? Um, Verify if all allow exit in inheritance chain, right? Proceed to next evaluation steps. Conditions are met. Reach final decision based on evaluation results. All right. So in here, so organization resource control policy evaluation. So it start organization resource control policy explicit deny. Yes. Then implicit deny applies, right? No, this organization resource control policy explicitly allow? Yes, then explicit allow, right? And then it's going to evaluate next policy in hierarchy, right? So that's how if your organization has a resource control policy, right? That's how the evaluation goes. So organization resource control policy explicit deny, yes, and then implicit deny applies in there. So explicit allow, yes, then explicitly allow, right? The evaluation conclude with one of these outcomes: implicit deny. Default when no policy is explicitly allowed. Explicit allow when all policy type permit. Explicit deny take precedent over any other allows, right? So important rules: single deny in any policy type override all allows. So just you need to understand. So this one is like the organization which has resource control policies, right? I think it's gone about nearly 30 minutes now. I'm going to stop video in this point, and I'm going to start further discussion on AWS solution architect from next video. Until then, thank you very much.